Welcome back to Ready Nerd Go, Graphic Policies Tabletop RPG podcast, brought to you by thecomichunter.net, where you can find all of your nerdy goodness, needs, and shit. My name's Alex. That's
I'm
Enko.
Enko.
It's been a while since we sat down to record properly, although we've been chatting, and all of a sudden I don't know how to do an intro anymore. Well, that's actually better than some of the ones I've been awake for, I think, which is
I was gonna
good.
say we've had some pretty gnarly intros.
Yeah,
That took one take. That's
which is impressive. I think the only time we ever edit is how bad the intro goes, and even then it's like, oh, that was really bad. Just do it again.
yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
it's been. I say it's been a while for us because we try to record weekly, and we tend to try and release every other week, just depending on how things line up. So, folks, you may not really have noticed an absence or any kind of difference in the schedule, but with the summer months, we haven't sat down for the better part of a month, I think.
Yeah, about that. I mean, everything goes haywire during the summer, so
Oh,
part of the reason we do the buffer.
yeah, exactly. Now, I know what we spoke about last time because I can see the show notes. That said, I don't know if you remember what we spoke about last time. We had alluded in the episode, it was about homebrewing. We were going to talk about either player entitlement or we were going to talk about underrated systems or games. We have since decided to change our mind because those are subjects that deserve a more awake pair of brains than we currently have at this hour of the day. And instead, to accidentally tie it back so well into the previous episode, we're going to talk about campaign settings. Now, full disclosure, we decided this all of 5 minutes ago. Anka knows what we're talking about. I don't. So nothing's really changed.
We're keeping on theme anyway.
All right. Now, campaign settings. So can you, genuine question, because you're going to need to not only set the scene for our lovely audience, but also for me. Can you go over exactly what it is you mean when you said campaign settings and then pre-made versus like evolved games?
Yeah, so campaign settings, you don't always need a campaign setting depending on like if
Before
you're
we
just
before we
creating a
even
dungeon and go.
before
But
you even do that, what's a campaign?
I'm working
All
into
right. Well, normally it's
it.
me that flies off the handle into shit, and I'm like, oh wait, I have to. Maybe I can rein Anchor back. No, Anchor knows what he's doing.
I'm just establishing up front, this isn't something you necessarily need to have.
I'm going to shut up for a bit.
This is why you're the pretty one.
I
But yeah,
always
so
thought-
I was wondering if you were going to keep to the shut up or not, and you nearly did. But yeah, so campaign settings, they're pretty much just like very in the loosest description, they're the world that your game takes place inside of. So like if you were going to have a campaign setting, which can be as big or as small, like you can have your campaign setting being like Chicago and your entire game takes place inside the city of Chicago. Or it can be something as grandiose as like, a specific an entire universe that's been fleshed out in some manner or another. It's the world that sets the default expectations of like, what exists in the world and usually kind of what you're going to be doing. Because like if you're like when we're playing in the Aliens RPG, we're playing in that world in that campaign setting.
that makes sense. It's not like you can say, oh, we're going to play a sci-fi campaign or like Aliens. Can I play Batman? No, you cannot play Batman. But Batman's come across the aliens before. It doesn't matter in this world. That is a fictionalized comic book. This is a world based off the movies and the novels that have nothing to do with Batman.
Yeah, and like if you guys want to like smash different worlds together to make your campaign setting, great. But once your campaign setting has been established, that's generally confining what type of game you're expecting to play. Like if if I say, hey, we're gonna play in the Aliens game, and you come to me saying, I want to play a Jedi, you've drastically misunderstood the purpose of what we're doing here today.
Drastically. And I think that it's okay if you're I mean, obviously, you're creating a campaign. You can do whatever you want to do,
Yeah.
and but if you're going to follow a pre-made, and I'm sure you'll get into this, like a pre-made story versus one that the GM is creating as they go, you're still going to want to make sure that before we even get going, hey, can I play this character who's kind of a Jedi but not really, and uses yada yada yada? Fine,
Yeah.
maybe.
Like XPs of popular characters happens all the time in role playing games. You
Oh,
will the amount of times that I've had, people like, in the D&D sphere, the mm, popular one for the longest time was Drizzt clones, and I don't know if you have any idea who that is.
you almost got a Drizzt tattoo.
Oh, well, then there you go.
Folks,
But
for those of you who don't know who Drizzt is, and I've never really known how to pronounce it, 'cause it's
oh,
DRZZZT.
do not assume I'm pronouncing it correctly. That is how
No,
I pronounce it, which is
it's
completely
that's how I've done it. So the fact that we do it at the same time, same is fine. Drizzt is a dark elf ranger, one of the most popular characters and most known characters in the Forgotten Realms D&D sphere, uh, written by R.A. Salvatore. There is what
campaign setting.
Yeah, like there's a couple dozen books out there, and if you're into fantasy and you want quick, heroic, easy to read fantasy, this is the shit you want to read. You don't have to start at the beginning, just find the first trilogy. It's not unlike comic books in that way. It gives you all you need. It's great.
Yeah. But yeah, so like Forgotten Realms, excellent example. That is a campaign setting. Like that like Forgotten Realms, like the world, the continents, the races, the monsters, the like people in it, all of that constitutes what the campaign setting is. And generally, if you're going to use like a pre-built campaign setting, it's because like generating an entire world is a lot of fucking work. Generally, when you're the GM and you're building the world for your players to play in, generally you're either building top down or bottoms up. Do you know what I mean by that, or go into it?
Go into it because although I have an idea, it's better to assume that I don't.
All right. So the main difference between top down and bottom up is the level of scope you're focusing on. So like if you're building the world that your players are playing in and you're focusing on like top down, then you might focus on like, hey, here is the map of the entire world that they can explore, and then here are the major kingdoms, and here are the politics and the history, and like creating like the world from like bedrock essentially. While if you're going more with a bottoms up approach, then you'd be starting like, okay, so you guys are starting in the town of Starter Town, and these are like the 3 or 4 NPCs that you will probably run into. And then as we need more of the world to exist, I will make it, or it will get made. So like when you starting your scope very small and focused in on just what the players need to play that first session, as opposed to the top-down approach where you might get into the various kingdoms and the geopolitics and all that stuff that might not at all directly impact session one, but it's setting the stage that you're playing in, as opposed to kick in the door and find out as you go.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
So like biggest reason for the pre-built ones is it's a lot of fucking work. And like if I want to play in like a fantasy steampunk setting that has like clockwork robots and a whole bunch of magitech, I could spend a whole bunch of time developing all that, how it works and fleshing out everything. Or I could pick up the Eberron campaign setting, which was made by Wizards of the Coast for, I think it was the 3.5 edition. It was either 3.5 or third edition. Either way, it was made in that era, and like that's the setting. The setting has all of that stuff in it. It has like the Warforged for your robots, and it has like airships that are powered by bound elementals, and it has like all of this stuff that you can just hop right in and explore, and then the GM doesn't need to figure all that out. And it also has the other helpful stuff of like all of the custom things are already statted out, and like there's a whole bunch of artwork that you and your players can both look at to get kind of a thematic sense of what the world is. Because if I say steampunk or magitech, that might put a completely different image into my head than what's into your head. But if we're both looking at the same picture, then we have that same reference point to go off of.
Who would have thought having common ground to start somewhere is a good thing in in an RPG?
Right? When because we always like to say that, oh, we're all sharing this imaginary world together, but
What I'm
functionally
seeing versus what you're seeing
yeah,
can be different.
yeah, functionally we're not. We each have our own little worlds we're imagining that we're trying to communicate with each other and keep as synced up as we possibly can.
Yeah,
And so,
and
having a pre-established campaign world makes that significantly easier to do.
exactly.
Yeah,
It's one of those things where you don't think about it at the time or I wouldn't have thought about it, but I'm sure it's something that, having gone over this numerous times with numerous people, it is something that you've had to think about numerous times because you've gone over it with numerous people.
yeah, and the campaign setting can also, I mean, a good pre-made campaign setting is generally like the themes of it are reinforced by the rules of the system you're playing in.
Right.
So, like, if I'm, for example, most of D&D's campaign settings, I can't say most, pretty much all of D&D's campaign settings have rich and really well fleshed out reasons for people to fight things, or for people to fight other monsters, or to like kill and loot and go for dungeon delves, because that's a core part of the D&D rule set. Combat makes up the vast majority of the rule book. And I've gotten into arguments with people about this. I'm like, oh no, it's only this much. Like, yeah, but like your entire progression as a character is primarily about how to kill things better. Like that is the core of what D&D is for. There's nothing wrong with that, but I wouldn't want to use D&D to play like a Call of Cthulhu game where
Yeah.
your characters are supposed to be mostly focused on investigating and be terrible at
At
fighting
anything.
these monsters.
Yeah, and I think that's something that you need to be aware of when you're getting into a game, is that just because you want to fight all the time, it's like, oh, I don't want all the progression to be fighting. It doesn't have to all be fighting. There are other
Yeah.
ways for the DM to do it, but at its core, you're right. Most of the D&D rulebook that I have read, which admittedly is not much, has been how to deal damage, magic, weapon, magic, ranged, melee, that sort of thing. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
No.
But a lot of the other stuff is, it all boils down to how to get into and or avoid an encounter. And honestly, most of it's how do you fight your way out of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Like yeah, I'm gonna say most systems, most like RPG systems that come out have a campaign setting attached to them. D&D is not the only one, but it's an interesting case where it has had, I think we're honestly in dozens at this point, of different like first party campaign settings made for it.
Yeah.
But most like indie stuff, and by indie I pretty much literally mean anything other than like Wizards of the Coast and maybe Paizo, like pretty much everyone that's not doing either a universal system or something that's more player generated will have a campaign setting attached to it. Like Call of Cthulhu has, you can play in different eras, but the default era of it is that stereotypical world that these old timey investigators live in and run around, usually with like the isms of the period glossed over. Like okay, we're technically playing in like old England, but if you want to play a woman or a black character, we're not going to make a big deal out of that because we don't really want to focus on that part of
We're
this
we're
historical
we're
time
more
period.
we're more interested in the technology, the
Yeah.
general era,
The,
as opposed to the political climate at the time.
yeah, the technology, the general style, kind of like
Yeah.
the feeling of that setting without the nasty parts attached to it. Because if a lot of people play, like not everybody plays RPGs for escapism. Some do play to really get into like that pathos of despair or one of the isms, or like really digging into and exploring that. But for the vast majority of us, we're playing these games to escape from the world for a little bit and enjoy ourselves somewhere else. And like, I don't want to be dealing with like homophobia or sexism or racism or that kind of
So
stuff in my make pretend games outside of like, oh, the Krogans and the I can't think of another name for something right now. It's like, oh, these two fantasy make believe cultures that have no real world correlation don't like each other. Cool, I can rock with that, but I don't want the
here's
real
a
world messing with my game.
here's a question for you. If you happen to be, this is off topic, but on topic. If
Yeah,
you
go for it.
happen to be playing a character and you realize that in this particular part of the world that character, say you're playing a dwarf, and in that particular part of the world, dwarves are hated, maligned, etc. At what point do you have a conversation with the GM? Look, I either need to change the race of my character, or because I can't deal with, I'm just not having fun dealing with this aspect of the game.
Have we had an episode of safety tools yet?
Yes, we have. We
Yeah.
have, yeah. And I think I don't know if that it came up, and all of a sudden, I mean, obviously, it's going to be a conversation in the beginning,
Yeah.
um,
But like
which
that
should
that is
capture
a
that.
very good example of something that like if you've made this character and like if you started in this area where dwarves are hated and you want to play a dwarf and you come into character creation with like, hey, dwarves are hated in this setting, I want to play a dwarf. Either I'm playing a dwarf because I want to lean into that and I want to like be somebody who fights back against the oppression, which can be a lot of fun,
Yeah,
not gonna lie. Or it could be something like, hey, I know this is the thematics of your world, but I just really like dwarves and I want to play a dwarf. And either way, that's something that talk to the GM about. And like if this is a pre-established game that you've already been playing and you're traveling to the land of the dwarf haters for whatever reason, then then that could also be something that above the table you just talk to the GMs like, hey, I know you've described this area like this. How is that going to affect me playing a dwarf? And like have that discussion above the table. Please, for the love of God, people, have your conversations above the table. I cannot begin to talk about the number of problems that would have been solved if people didn't try to solve them in the make believe world, but instead went, hey, as a player to an, as a as a real life human being to another real life human being, can we talk about this and then we'll
and then
continue the fiction?
yeah, because this isn't easy for me, and I'm not super comfortable with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and like
Look,
that's part of what the campaign setting is about. Is it'll have a lot of those inbuilt assumptions put into it. Like, and the reason that I kind of hit on this topic to begin with, and it's actually a fantastic launching point, so thank you for that one,
oh, you're welcome.
is the whole reason that I came into this thought process in the beginning was because Wizards of the Coast, the people who make Dungeons and Dragons, they tend to every once in a while they release playtest packets of new like classes or class archetypes or ancestries or whatever they're currently wanting player feedback on. And generally, not always, but generally you can get a pretty good idea of, like what's in the pipeline that hasn't been released yet based on what they're playtesting. And they have this setting that hasn't been updated. Like it was re-released in fourth edition, but I can't remember if it was first edition or second edition that actually properly came out in, and that's part of what I'll get back to. But there's a setting that they made called Dark Sun, which is kind of not kind of it's very like gritty and post-apocalyptic. The whole concept of it is that pretty much arcane magic, and there's a whole bunch of tiny conflicting details that we'll get into maybe, but this is the broad strokes. Arcane magic pretty much sucks the life force out of the world to power itself, and there's some super greedy people who kept using this defiling magic, and now the planet is mostly like a dead desert that people are struggling to survive in. And there's a lot of themes about like ecological devastation and human greed and all that stuff. But one of the major themes of that story was like, yeah, there is tyrannical rulers. There's like the halflings in the setting are cannibals. They eat the other they eat other sentient species, and slavery is a massive part of this setting. Like it's impossible to ignore the fact that slavery exists in this setting, and there's a lot of different types of slavery. Like in the real world, the one that most of us are familiar with nowadays is like United States of America chattel slavery, which was like I think an entire magnitude more horrific than most of the forms of slavery used throughout history. And that's the type that's used in Dark Sun, probably mostly just because the people who wrote it were Americans, and that's the only exposure to it they really had. But there's been a conversation going on for a very years now, and it was a meme for the longest time of like, oh, like when is Wizards of the Coast going to re-release Dark Sun? Like, because I love this setting, like either because I like dark gritty settings or because I like like hope punk, where like I want to be one of the people fighting back against all these monstrous things, and in the dying light against the darkness. And then in when this episode is recorded, a week or two back, Wizards of the Coast released a playtest packet with a lot of class archetypes that are very blatantly from the world of Arthas, which is the world that Dark Sun, the name of the world in Dark Sun. And so it got, the conversation kicked into high gear again about, hey, how much are they going to change this setting to like appeal to modern audiences? Like, will it still have the chattel slavery in it? Will it have slavery in it at all? Like, what are they changing? How much are they going to change? Because when you re-release a campaign setting for a new edition, things about it change to accommodate the new rules of the system that it exists in. Because like when Dark Sun was re-released for 4th edition, a lot of it changed because the rules for 4th edition are functionally an entirely different game than the rules from 2nd edition. And I say this as somebody who really likes 4th edition, but they're drastically different games.
And you would think that, so extrapolating on what you said, you would think that if you're going to re-release a setting and you adjust certain things, you're going to take into account changes in the social dynamic in general in people's lives. That hey, they may have been fine with this at this point, but maybe this isn't the best thing to bring up or to bring into the world at the moment.
Yeah, and like it's something because like the pop culture isn't the right word I want to use for this. Like the what's acceptable in modern day discourse is an ever moving target, right? And like
Yeah,
what might be good representation 30 years ago is cringy. We don't do that in modern times.
accidentally horrifically awful now.
Yeah, the World of Darkness games, they a lot of their books, they would try to like go into other cultures and like adapt other cultures for their settings of whether they were like vampire, werewolf, whatever, and they would try to like bring in these other cultures into their game books, which for the time was commendable because they were trying to like showcase a world that wasn't just based on white North America and white Europe. Like,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it was like,
like
but looking back, they had a lot of not great releases. Like they had one book that was about the Romani people as the very stereotypical version that you hear
mm-hmm.
of and see of, and using the words that are now considered slurs for them. And but at the time, it was like, hey, this is like a really interesting glimpse into this culture, and like they've done as much research as you can do pre-internet to
Well, and
bring these to life in a book. But looking at it now, it's like, oh no, there's a whole bunch of like unfortunate stereotypes and things you're just not supposed to say about these people in here, but it's a
you
moving
don't.
target.
The thing is, that's just it. Like it's, I reckon, and I recognize that frustrates people is that things can be a moving target, and how do I know what was good 1 minute isn't good the next, and the with the target moving and with people getting older, they're used to saying something one a It's why you often get, well, they're old, that's okay, as a qualifier, and for some people that's understandable, and for others you're like, but just because they're old doesn't mean it is okay though.
Yeah. And then you get into like reclaiming words too. Like there's certain words that I am comfortable using as a person with my identities
That I will
that
absolutely not use
yeah.
because it's not my word to reclaim.
Yeah, and then there's some that have been like readapted to like general modern discourse, which I'm really not fond of, but it is what it is. And but it is it's the moving target. Language changes in ways that nobody really wants. It's just how it evolves over time. And yeah, so it makes re-releasing old campaign settings really difficult, and that's kind of what triggered my want to talk about campaign settings. Was like, hey, if Dark Sun comes back, how different is Dark Sun going to be? And then I was reading a thread on one of my favorite RPG forums about this. I'm not getting into which one.
Yeah.
Don't feel like doxing right now, but it
I
like it
wasn't going to ask you for the record.
but it's they were talking and they were having a discussion. Oh, like I thought, it's like for me, it's like defiling magic only works when it works like this. Like that was the original way it was done. That's how it should be done. And then the people who came in on later editions were like, no, 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 I like it more like this. And then it got really interesting later into the thread where some people actually started going back to the original books and like pulling up the information on the original settings. Like, so you were saying that it worked like this in the original book, but it doesn't. That's just how either you remembered it did, or how you had house ruled it did from a long time ago, or how you had just mentally integrated changes from later editions into what Dark Sun meant to you. And so that's the most fraught part about trying to re-release an old setting into a new edition is, or not even in new editions, like re-releasing anything, like remaking anything, any form of media, is that what we our mental map of what this was and what this is very rarely actually maps onto what was actually there.
Which is fascinating, isn't it? When you're like, hey, this is how it was. Like, no, it wasn't. It's just we don't remember that. We don't.
And
We
it's
or we're misremembering with the best of intentions how something may have impacted or may have been recorded at the time, because you're not necessarily thinking about how what we assume was good representation at the time really wasn't. Like, oh, no, but it was good. I remember it being good, so it must have been A instead of B.
yeah, and then like there's certain beloved media of mine that I refuse to go back and see again because I know that my nostalgia tinted version of it
Is not the
is
same as.
is not at all what was there, and I don't want to ruin my memories of that media with the reality of what it was.
I think that's fair. And honestly, it's one of those things where I'm sure there are things I've listened to. Like, I was recently thinking about an episode of a TV show that I used to love as a kid, and I mean, it was lowbrow, crass humor at the time. I'm thinking, if I rewatch that now, how much that would be like, oh no, that's terrible.
Yeah, and
And
like
I don't
I've
want to, but
and I've been recently getting back into and trying to finish my Ursula K. Le Guin books.
yeah,
Because like, side note, listeners, if you've never read anything by Ursula K. Le Guin, do so. I don't really care what you pick up. Earthsea is like her most known work, but she's done fantasy, she's done sci-fi, she's done like just modern for when it was written. But like she's fantastic writer. On personally one of the greats, but there's this quote from her that I'm going to paraphrase here because I did not look this up in advance. The
how
general
dare
point of the
you
quote,
come here unprepared?
I know I'm a monster, but the the general quote is like when you can read a book as a child and love it, and come back as an adult and read it and love it, but the reasons you love it as a child are completely different than the reasons you love it as an adult, because you're a different person with different experiences and you're taking different things from that work.
Yes, yes, that's entirely true and fair.
It's like on and there's the good sides of that where like I reread the Animorph books a couple of years back, and I don't know if you ever read the Animorphs.
I know of them. I don't know if I've ever read them.
When I read them as a child, it was a whole lot of like yeah, young kids like me turning into animals and fighting aliens. This is awesome. And then reading it as an adult, and it's like, oh no, this is the story of like a group of guerrilla child soldiers slowly succumbing to PTSD over the course of the series.
A little bit different then. A little
Yeah,
bit
like
different.
still amazing books, and like honestly looking back, it's like, oh, this is where my views on like pacifism and the military in general and a lot of stuff, this is where a lot of my views on this stuff was set, because I didn't consciously recognize them as a child, but I still intook what that book was had to say about these things.
Yep. It's
But
crazy how something like that can really impact you and you have no idea.
right? But then on the flip side, you can get the people who have the nostalgia tinted glasses of going like, I don't know when Star Trek got political, and it's like it's always been political. Just you watched it the first time when you were a child and you didn't understand it was political at the time.
And or at the time what was political about it seemed okay to you. Like maybe it hasn't changed, but maybe you have.
Yeah, and like
For better or for worse.
my favorite example of it is like Star Trek had the first interracial kiss on TV.
Yeah.
At the time, massively groundbreaking and very political.
And
Nowadays, that's nobody cares.
no, and that's just it. No one cares. And that is what I hope is going to happen for half of this shit in the future is that 20, 30 years down the road, if not hopefully less, but 20, 30 years down the road, like, oh my God, this happened. And no one cares.
Yeah, so like when I was reading about Dark Sun maybe coming back, and thinking, it was like I only the only edition of Dark Sun that I've actually played, because I only started in like the 3.5 era, and if memory serves, Dark Sun wasn't even released for that edition. It's like for me, it was I played it in fourth edition, and fourth edition is a very different version than the second edition version. And like I'd go back and like read some of the old lore books from second edition, and like go online and read the Wikipedias and like pull information in that way. And I've always enjoyed the themes of Dark Sun, but I've always enjoyed the themes of Dark Sun as how I saw Dark Sun.
Right.
And while these other people online, they have their own perfectly valid interpretations of Dark Sun, because they've taken other pieces of the world and the setting that I haven't, and they've internalized those pieces instead of the pieces that I have. And so when you're trying to re-release this setting, it's like I don't know how you can do that and please any of the original fans of the setting.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like, and it's
Yeah.
hey, for me, slavery is a core part of the Dark Sun setting, because that was part of what I loved about it, was that you had this evil right on the face that you could you could fight against it. You could be a slave who freed themselves from their bondage and are now fighting to free other ones, or you could be somebody who maybe they used to own slaves, but then they changed their ways and now they're trying to be a better person. And there's all these stories that you can tell that require this bad thing to exist to tell. And if they strip that out of it, it's like, yeah, I can just add that into my home game, because you can always, because it's I always say, like, when we're playing in a pre-built campaign setting, it's like we're playing in our version of this setting. We're not playing the official by the book, everything has to be exactly how it's written in these pages. It's like, yeah,
Exactly.
I can just stick in the bits of Dark Sun that I think are necessary for Dark Sun to work, but that doesn't change that the core that the more the world that I want to run drifts from what is officially published, the harder it is for me to make use of any of that officially published material.
And so at that point you then start looking at, well, with the new stuff that's coming out, do I actually care about it? Or not do I care,
Yeah,
but how do I react to that?
yeah, and like for me, I haven't bought Wizards of the Coast product in, God, I can't remember how long now. It's like it's not really going to affect me, regardless of how much I like the Dark Sun setting, and regardless of how good the new book is. I'm probably never going to buy it because it's for a system I don't play, and I already have all of the material available to me to make that setting work in whatever system I want to play
Yeah.
it in. But for the people who do really want it, and that's part of where the big debate was coming back and forth, like, oh, Wizards of the Coast is never going to re-release it because they don't have the balls or whatever, and or like it's like, hey, even if they do release it, it's going to be a version you don't like, or I don't like. It's like it's like they need to do it because it's my favorite setting, or I don't want them to do it because it is my favorite setting.
Sorry, that extended pause is because I was trying not to sneeze, and you just finished talking as it was coming. I was like, damn it! Of all of the time for that to awkwardly happen.
The one time I don't ramble just long enough.
I know. Well, that's just it. I was like, I can rely on Anko to keep talking. No, he's made a very valid point. Damn it.
How could he?
um, but yeah, no. So to your point, it's just because there is something that you love, and you have modified it to allow you and your friends, or you and your table, because it's not always the same to
Mhm.
to play a decent game, doesn't necessarily mean that they've released all this new content. Woohoo, we'll get it. How do we fit that in? Fuck it, we won't.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's again, it's not a bad thing if you're well established in the version of the world that you have created. Great, wonderful. Let's
Mm.
keep doing it that way.
And it's kind of funny because it kind of goes on too, like thinking of stepping away from Dark Sun for a moment, thinking on like campaign settings based on established works in general. The conflicts can get really interesting because like if we want to play, say, Star Wars, for example, there are a lot of conflicting versions of Star Wars out there. There are versions like if you're looking at the books, if you're looking at the games, if you're looking at just the movies, if you're including the TV shows, there's a lot of canon in there, and a lot of that canon doesn't play nicely with other parts of that canon. And so if you're playing in an established setting that has changed over time, whether it's because it's an RPG setting that's had multiple editions, or whether it's a media conglomerate empire that's reduced a million different things in it, saying, oh hey, I want to play a Star Wars game. Cool, let's play Star Wars. That's the beginning of the conversation, because then you guys need to sit down and go, okay, what does Star Wars mean to you guys, and like what needs to be in this game for you to consider it Star Wars, and what needs to not be in this game for you to
Um,
consider it the Star Wars you want to play.
and what time period do you want to put it in? Because
Exactly.
it could be in the High Republic, like long before the prequel movies. It could be set in and around the prequel movie time. It could
Yeah.
be just after or in the gap between the prequel movies. It could be after Return of the Jedi, not unlike when The Mandalorian is set. If
Like,
you're really desperate, you could do it after the final three movies in the trilogy.
do gray Jedi exist? Do Gungans exist? There's it's there's a whole bunch of things that you can take or leave from various parts of the media that if I say, man, I want to play Star Wars, and you go, yeah, I want to play Star Wars, and I'm thinking, man, I can't wait to play a gray Jedi and love those things, and you're going, God, I hate gray Jedi, they just completely
Oh
take me out of the setting, then
man,
that's
I can't wait to play pod racing. We're not going near that planet.
I want to play a Gungan pod racer, and it's just like
Okay, but we're nowhere near that planet, so how are you going to do that?
yeah, and it's like it's well, there's narrative justification, and the other people at the table might go, okay, yeah, no, that works, cool. We can do a Star Wars game that's just all about a pod racing crew that's trying to win the pod racing tournament that's happening at the end of the year. you can do an entire campaign on that and not even touch on, the Sith or the Jedi or
Yeah.
smuggling or whatever parts of the setting that you don't want to think about. But it's also possible to, hey, pod racing just isn't a thing in this world.
Yeah, and that's okay. So, full disclosure, I don't know how we got to where we're at.
Well, I mean, nobody ever does. That's part of the fun.
The reason I say that is because my last notes that I made were campaign settings. What is a campaign setting? Pre-made campaigns versus evolved games, and that was it. And that's honestly how it probably about more or less how it's gonna be. So,
well, I mean, you could probably stick in like how making campaign settings your own and how campaign settings evolve. That first, the second one first, and the first one second.
yeah, I will. And this is one of those things that I that's all it's gonna be in there.
You poor listeners.
I feel like this is one of those episodes that people enjoy more anyway.
I hope so. I'm not looking at our listening count. I'm not looking at how many people actually watch this thing. I'm not.
It's a running theme. We don't care. Or not that we don't care. It's a running theme. We just don't know.
Yeah. We're happy to have you, but we also don't really care if there's 500 of you or 5 of you. Honestly, 500, I'd be a little more concerned because, like, wait a minute, how are this many people listening to us?
Why?
But
why?
Regardless.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Anyway. Okay. So I think that's everything you had, right? More or less, or is there more?
Yeah, that's generally what I wanted to. I mean, honestly, the entire thing was it's like, man, Dark Sun might be coming back. I want an excuse to talk about Dark Sun, and then just use campaign world as a preface.
Yeah, and then I gave you an accidental perfect layup for it.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Like, to be clear, listeners, not a planned thing. He just accidentally gave me the perfect segue, and he does this fairly consistently. It's one of the reasons that this works so well.
And that's just it. Like I even had to refrain myself from saying, "Hey, that was a great segue," because I do that, and then it ruins the segue.
we have also done that too. That is true.
Yeah. Okay, so I don't have any other questions. I think it's you can, like I said, you can boil it down to the world that it's in, when is the world in, and then what aspect of the world are you looking to explore with. I don't have anything else that I was curious about based on what we have. And folks, if you have, let us know. The email is in the show notes, but it's readynerdgo@gmail.com. It's super complicated. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, maybe once enough of you actually send in questions, you might do like a listener question episode. But that's expecting a lot. We'll see how that goes.
That's expecting a lot for us to be that organized too.
Exactly.
All right. I think that's about it, right? There's nothing else that we need to.
No, I think I've covered everything I wanted to, touching on campaign settings, touching on pre-built versus making it your own, top down, bottoms up, how campaigns evolve over time. I got to geek about Dark Sun for a little bit. Yeah, no, I think we're good.
Well, there we go then.
Yeah. Game on, folks.
Hey, thanks for watching the previous video from Graphic Policy Television. Just by watching, you help support our site. Thank you so much. Now, if you're watching these videos, you probably care about geeky things like movies, television, comic books, toys, games, video games, you name it. You can go and subscribe right now to our YouTube channel to stay in touch and catch all the new videos, or check out our website at graphicpolicy.com. There's a nice link on this end of the video. But as always, thank you for watching. Keep on rocking and keep it geeky.